everyone, and welcome to the Night Garden. I'm Vamp, and I'm here to talk to you about art today. Today, I wanted to talk about digital art and traditional art, the differences and the pros and cons of each. I will be talking about these mostly in terms of advantages. As I talk about this, a piece that I'm doing in both digital and traditional will be up on the screen, so feel free to watch as I chat, or you can treat this more like a podcast, either way. So let's get started. Since my channel is primarily a digital channel, I will start with that. Digital advantages. The first, as well as one of the biggest advantages to digital art, is that the worry about wasting materials is just not there. The possibilities are endless. You can try things indefinitely. I got my start as a traditional artist, and I know that before I started working in and focusing on digital, I was terrified of ruining my expensive pens and wasting my quote-unquote good paper on something that just wasn't quote-unquote worth it. If I don't like how something is turning out on a digital canvas, I can erase without having any ghosted lines, or change something without massive effort, or even just junk the canvas entirely and start over without stressing over wasted materials or money. This makes it a lot easier for me to loosen up when I'm trying to make a lot of designs or when I'm sketching. Side note, at this point, I would say that any artwork is worth spending time on and using your materials on, but when I first started transitioning into digital, I definitely did not have that mindset. So, advantage number 2, faster sketches or skipping the sketch stage entirely. Not only am I faster at coming up with many designs in a digital medium, I can start a small thumbnail sketch and then resize that very quickly without grids or a light box, unlike traditional. This makes it so that if it's something simple that I've sketched, I don't even need to refine the sketch at all. I can just jump into the inking stage. And that leads me to number 3, the undo button. Because of the undo button, I don't need to be as precious with my inking. And because I don't need to be as precious with my inking, I'm more confident with my choices and I let myself be a bit riskier. This being said, there are ways to correct mistakes in traditional art, but they tend to either take a long time, have added dry time, or have the risk of damaging the piece. The undo button is immediate, lossless, and it makes it faster to create an illustration at all. Number 4 is kind of in this vein as well. One tool. When you're doing digital art, the physical tool that you're using is always the same. It's a stylus. It's something that you grow used to. It has the same hand movements. You never have to adjust your grip or figure out a new weight. It's always the same in your hand. This is something that I actually don't talk about all that often, but I have nerve damage in my left shoulder, which is my dominant arm. Having something that has a weight that I'm used to, a size that's comfortable for my hand, and something I can easily control is really important for my work. I can do line work, painting, ultra-realistic photo textures, all with the same tool. Another side to this is the aids that come with digital tools. Your hotkeys. Press down Shift to use a ruler, bump up the stabilization to combat the shake that my nerve damage causes. Use a shape tool instead of a stencil. It's all one tool. And with traditional, you do have equivalents, right? Like I just named some of them off. Rulers, T-squares, stencils, a maul stick to rest on to combat shakiness. All sorts of things like that exist. But there are multiple tools. Because I don't need to focus on switching the tool or changing my posture, getting used to the difference in weight in my hand, the tightness of my grip, etc., things like that, I can be more efficient and work faster. This leads me to point number 5, which is that digital is just more convenient. Digital has a high upfront cost, which has a disadvantage. Your tablet is going to be expensive. But you can make as many pieces as you want over time with no overhead cost except for your original upfront cost. Also, because you're making the piece digitally, it is so much easier to deliver files to clients when you are painting them something than it is to send a physical item. You can also make corrections, alterations, or complete variations on a piece without nearly as much effort. Ultimately, most of the advantages to digital work tend to be focused around efficiency. With that thought in mind, let's talk about the advantages of traditional work. So, for traditional advantages, the first advantage to traditional work is that once you make it, you really can't make it again in the same way. Even if you're doing something that is meant to make copies, such as screen printing or other forms of printmaking, there will be small imperfections that make that thing unique. They are one of a kind. This leads me to the next point that kind of expands on this. Number 2, unique, one-of-a-kind effects. Some of my favorite traditional pieces have had happy accidents that come from just using the medium. Little inconsistencies from paint dripping, thin areas of ink, markers starting to dry out. You can try to replicate these things in digital, but they tend to look contrived and generated. You can scan textures of your own paints and things like that, but if they're too spread out or your canvas size is too big, then you start seeing the repeating pattern. These little imperfections make a piece shine in traditional because they tend to complement the medium that the artist decided. These first 2 points give the added benefit of the pieces being worth more as originals. Number 3, a narrowed scope. Digital can sometimes easily get extremely overwhelming because there are less limitations. The sky is the limit, right? And at first that feels like an advantage, but if you have too vague of a starting point, then it's hard to figure out what direction to go because there's just too many things you can do. When you approach something traditionally, you generally have a strong idea of what look you're going for when you choose a medium. And because you tend to be more precious with your materials because of the overhead cost, you tend to have a pretty good idea of what look you're going for with the piece that you're making. So it's easy to keep your scope narrow. For example, I wouldn't use Copic markers for something that I didn't want to be bright and graphic. And I wouldn't use pen and ink for something that I didn't want to come off as gritty and dark. The focus on what medium to use or what mood I want a piece to have helps me keep my focus smaller and narrow down on what I want to make easier. Which leads me to number 4, tool limitations. Tool limitations may at first seem like a disadvantage, but just like the last point that I made about the scope, you approach each tool that you use with intent, and then you have a stronger idea of the look and effect that you are going for, and those tools can only go so far. Number 5, a cheaper startup cost. All you really need to do traditional artwork is a paper and a pencil. Of course, there are fancy tools and different mediums and different ways to get different effects, but at the end of the day, if you have a $20 bill for a pack of pencils or ballpoint pens and a ream of printer paper, that's all you need to get started. And unless you're looking at an incredibly niche tool, I'm looking at you, Photo Emotion Exposure Unit, for screen printing, thank you. Most things may be expensive, but they won't ultimately be drawing tablet expensive. So it is a lower startup cost, even to do more intensive artwork than pencil doodles. Paint is less expensive than a drawing tablet. Generic woodcut and linocut tools are less expensive. Serigraphy, you can have an entire studio for screen printing for less than about $400, as long as you're not doing extremely niche things. So you can have a smaller upstart cost for traditional work. Ultimately, most of the advantages of traditional work comes with limiting the infinite possibilities and getting interesting effects that allow you to release a bit of control. So wrapping up on this entire video, it's time for me to give my own opinion. And honestly, I love so many different mediums when it comes to traditional work. There are pros and cons to both digital and traditional mediums, but at the end of the day, they're both tools to unlock your creativity. I'd work in traditional art mediums more often if I felt like I could get it done in quick enough amount of time to get projects done for clients, but I like both equally. Digital art is more convenient, but I think I will always love the peace that comes with painting or working in pen and ink. I will also love the happy surprises that come with traditional. And that's the beautiful thing about art, isn't it? Like many things about art, medium choice is subjective. What I love about digital, someone else might not like. What someone else loves about traditional, I may not like. We're all about as unique as our individual works are. So with that, I'll leave you. If you liked this video, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, then check out my website. I have artwork for sale there. Or you can support at Ko-fi or Patreon to get weekly updates with works in progress, free access to tutorials, and other such perks. And as always, I hope that you are taking care of yourselves. Drink your water and do what you can. Have a good one, changelings, and we'll see you next week with a Noob vs. Pro episode. Bye, everybody.